Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of the East Brunswick Advisory Health Council's Wellness Spotlight. Everyone knows we live in a stressful world. There's physical stresses, falls, accidents, injuries, sleeping at a propped or a strained angle, wearing high-heeled shoes, carrying a wallet in the back pocket, to name a few. We have chemical stresses, water and air pollution, food additives, all kinds of medications that people may take are chemically stressful on the body. And then there's emotional stress. When you have a slip or a fall, you get up, dust yourself off, and most people heal in a relatively short period of time. Chemical stresses can work through our body, and again, in a few hours or a couple of days, they're gone. But what about the emotional stresses that can stay with us not only throughout the day, but also can invade our sleep and seem to affect us at all times? With us today is Dr. Laurie Schlussel, who's a psychologist and is here to share her insights on what we can do to think healthier and be healthier. So welcome to the Wellness Spotlight, Laurie.
Thanks, Ken.
Before you start sharing some information about healthier thinking, let's learn a little bit more about you. Tell us about you.
Okay. Well, I'm a licensed psychologist here in New Jersey and in New York. I've been licensed for almost 20 years, so I've had lots of jobs, worked in lots of places. I have experience working with children, adolescents, and adults in all kinds of tough places. Actually, I've worked in the state psychiatric hospital on some locked units. I've worked with adolescents in residential facilities and on psychiatric units. Right now, I work most days of the week on a psychiatric unit with kids ages 5 through 15. And just recently, I opened up a private practice here in East Brunswick, and I see everybody.
Are you originally from East Brunswick?
Nope.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Yonkers.
In Yonkers?
Yonkers, New York.
And when did you come to this area?
My husband and I actually moved to New Jersey, to Central Jersey. It was Highland Park. The year of my psychology internship. I was just finishing my program, I was doing my training, and my internship was at Trenton Psychiatric Hospital. My husband was working up north in the Bronx, so this was kind of midway for us, and that's when we first moved to New Jersey.
Laurie, for our viewers, could you speak in a little detail on what the difference is between being a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I find that most people in the world really don't know the difference. They use them interchangeably, and we're really not. A psychiatrist goes through medical school. They are MDs, they have formal medical training, and as a result, they have privileges to write prescriptions for medication. Their clinical training is different also. By clinical, I mean in terms of the amount of training they have in talking to people and listening to problems and things like that. Psychologists do not go to medical school, and here in New Jersey, in order to be called a psychologist, that term is protected. You have to have a license in psychology, and that could be, the degree that you have can be either a Ph.D. or a Ph.D. or even a doctorate of education, but you must have a license in the field of psychology. And we do not have prescription privileges. Most states do not, although I think that some states are now trying to get psychologists the ability through training to get prescription privileges, but for the most part we don't. But we really focus our training on clinical interventions, on talking with people, trying to help them with their problems through different kinds of techniques. Many psychologists do research. There are lots of different things you can do with the degree, actually, but the biggest difference is in the medication piece and in the clinical training piece.
Thank you. It seems like more and more these days we see ads on television for people to take psychotropic drugs, drugs that are going to treat their mood. Why is that? Is it because problems like this are so prevalent today, or is it because the drug companies just want to make money, or both?
That's an interesting question. I certainly think that there's a time and a place for everything. I think that certainly certain conditions really can use medication. For example, if I'm working with a child who's 6 years old and they have intensive symptoms of ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and they cannot sit still in the chair, and they cannot not even have eye contact with me, and they can't focus on anything, they can't do their schoolwork. As we're talking, they're looking under the chair and looking all around. So I cannot use my therapeutic services with them too well. They can't accommodate that. And so in the situation like that, for example, medication, the right medication, would be really helpful, in addition to other things, in helping them settle down, helping them focus just enough so that now they can benefit from the therapeutic interaction, from the interventions that we do, from schoolwork, from limit setting, things like that. So I think, to answer your question, I think that in this country, we're kind of looking for quick fixes. We're looking for the easy way out. We're looking for that one thing that will make it all better, the pill that will make it all better, make us feel better, make us act better. And I think very often we miss the big picture of that. Move away from the Western philosophy, and I guess it's more of an Eastern philosophy that's more holistic. And you look at the whole person, where they're at, what they're about, and what other things could help them to feel better.
Okay, but you still haven't completely answered my question yet, because we're seeing so much of this now. Why are we seeing so much of this now? Do we live in a more stressful time now? Are more people more emotionally challenged now than ever before? Or is it just that we're more aware of it and we have ways to be able to bring it out so that more people can see it?
Well, that's interesting, because I think that with the advancement of technology, you would think life would be easier and better. And it is in some ways, but I do think that times are more challenging now for different reasons. I think that we do take on more as a society, as individuals. That increases our stress, that makes life more challenging for us, creates clinical conditions like anxiety and depression and inability to cope with the things on your plate. And I think in addition to that, there are all kinds of environmental factors. I think that the quality of the food is a real issue. Now, I'm not a nutritionist and I'm not a specialist in this area, but I think that there are a lot of health-related things going on now that are poor for our health. Poor nutrition, getting things on the go because we're so busy, so we choose to process things. Lack of sleep, I know I'm guilty of that, not enough sleep, so that you can't possibly function normally without enough sleep. So I think it's a combination of things.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because a lot of parents today, knowing the risks of putting their families on medications, are looking at, they're looking at less invasive ways to be able to help their body function better instead of just treating the symptom through eating better, reducing stress, exercise, the type of care that you can offer, chiropractic services, a lot of different things. And then the drugs are always there as a last resort. But judging from what you're saying, it sounds to me as if you feel the drugs have their place if a person's been unresponsive to all of those other things. It gives you the ability to be able to get in and work your magic to help that person be able to respond, and then wean them off, or work with the psychiatrist in weaning them off of these medications once they're healthier. Is that true?
Well, you know what? I have to say that from my perspective, and I've worked with a lot of psychiatrists, and they don't usually ask me my opinion about medication, whether somebody should be on or off. But when they have, my response is always, I'm not the medication specialist. I would never make a suggestion to somebody who's licensed in that area, just as I would never make that suggestion to you about whether a person needs to be on or off medication, or the dose needs to be tapered or changed. That's not my shtick. That's not my area. But what I can say is, this child is on this medication, but we're still seeing all these symptoms. We're still seeing all these problems. Maybe we're missing the boat here. And in order for them to get better benefit from all the other therapeutic techniques, maybe we have to look at that. But that's not my area. I think it's hard to know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. You know, some people have a genetic predisposition for all kinds of illnesses, just as we do for physical health and physical illness. You know, people have high blood pressure, it runs in the family. They have heart conditions that run in the family. They have cancer that runs in the family. So too with mental illness, there can be and is often a genetic predisposition.
Really?
But that does not mean that you are sentenced to a life sentence. There are many different things that can mediate that. So I would say if somebody has it in the family that they have a particular mental health condition, then it may mean that, you know, medication is one of those steps that they need to go through in order to help that situation, in addition to some other things. Medication really can't teach you coping skills. Medication really can't teach you how to have good social interaction, you know, and things like that. So I believe medication is necessary at times, but I don't believe that it's the whole picture. And anyone who does feel that it's the whole picture, I think that they're missing out on a real valuable part of treating somebody.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you tend to see in your practice?
I would say that people come to see me because of stress, work-related stress, anxiety, depression. Interestingly enough, I find a lot of people have histories of trauma as children. And it's really not until we start talking about their current problems, their current relationship issues, their current, you know, coping strategies and how they're being affected. It's at that point that we find out, yes, many of the people I see have had, you know, early trauma and had not realized the effect on them currently. And so I find myself very often talking with them about that trauma, and we talk about coping skills and, you know, how to move forward with that now.
Do these early traumas involve parenting interactions, or is it something that happened in their childhood with other friends, you know, bullying? Where does it stem from?
I would say, well, when I'm talking to an adult, I would say that it has to do with, you know, parenting issues. When they were growing up, maybe unavailability of parents or abusive parents. Very often it could be a traumatic experience that happened with another relative or a friend somewhere or on a date. But really things that have happened quite some time ago that continue somehow to affect a person's choice in relationships and the coping skills on how they deal with what's going on in their lives.
People are around people all of the time, Laurie. What is it that makes that one interaction with that one person, whether it's a parent or a relative or a friend, that one thing that happens, what is it that allows that situation to enter and hold a person for so long that it can manifest into issues into adulthood, where they interact with other people around them the same way, and many things are said and done the same way, but those things and those people don't affect them?
Well, you know, I do wonder, and I don't know enough about this, but I wonder in terms of brain functioning, what trauma does to the brain. You know, my question is there some sort of neurological functioning in the brain that gets triggered once you have a trauma? My guess is that it would be yes, but I'm not really clear on the literature for that. You know, I'll give you an example, though, about why that negative event would hold, you know, such value, such negative value for somebody. Let's say that you're a kid and you're getting feedback from your teacher. And your teacher is telling you, you know, I like the way you did this. I like the way you did this. This was great. This was a great thing on the report. But, you know, here, I really wasn't pleased with how you did this part. Now, of course, it varies with personality, you know, the personality of the kid that's receiving that information. But I just wonder, is that kid really going to be more likely to walk away with, oh, she didn't like the way I did my conclusion. You know, ooh, I did such a great job here, but she didn't like that. I often wonder, and I think this is the case, that we place more value on negative than on positive. Somehow it just holds, in psychology they use the word valence, somehow it holds more weight and it affects you more than the positive, and it kind of erases those positive things that were said about you.
Well, the destructive forces are always more powerful than constructive forces. It can take 100 years to grow a forest, and it's burnt down in an hour.
Well, there you go.
You know,
Perfect example.
You see, so in Florida, there were communities that were wiped out in a matter of hours when a hurricane came through that were there for 100 years. You know, it can take a lifetime for someone to grow, and an accident can take them out of your life in the blink of an eye. The destructive forces are always more powerful than constructive forces. So how do you help people deal with the challenges that they have and be able to improve their resistance to the destructive forces that are around us every day?
Well, that's a good question, considering that we all have to deal with stress, and it's pretty prevalent in our society. I think when somebody has stressful things going on in your life, it's really important to identify what that is. So if somebody came to me and said, I'm so stressed and I'm overwhelmed, well, the first thing I would do is say, let's try to identify your stressors. What do you think it is in your life that's stressing you out? Once we've identified them to the extent possible, are they changeable? Are they stressors that you can somehow negotiate? Can you give up one of your jobs? Can you, handle this differently? Is there anything that you can take off your plate if your plate is full? If there is no negotiating that, if all these stressors are must stressors and there's no changing that, so then the question is, can we change our outlook? Can we have a different perspective on these stressors? Can I look at them as temporary? Right now I'm working 2 jobs. I'm coming home very late. Talking about myself, actually.
Would you like to lie down?
How much do you charge? I don't know.
I work from the neck down. That's your department.
So I mean, that's that's very often how I would view something like that. This is a temporary part of my life. Right now, this is what needs to happen, and so it won't always be that way. It'll become easier in the future. So that's one example of changing perspective. Certainly, we know that physical exercise is helpful. To exercise your body actually helps exercise your mind. I read in health magazines all the time about the endorphin effect, what that does to your brain when you exercise. Relaxation techniques, that's certainly helpful. Good nutrition, I think, is helpful. You'll probably get a lot more out of fruits and vegetables and healthy kinds of food as opposed to a candy bar, which kind of, is short-term energy to help you cope. Although, again, as I say, I'm not a nutritionist expert, but it's kind of common sense to me. And I think doing things that you like, making sure no matter how busy you are and how hard that is, I understand that, but I think it's important to find things that you like to do, hobbies, and the people that you like to do it with. Find some pal, a spouse, a family member, a friend that you just like to spend time with and do it sometimes.
But it seems that one of the things that stresses people out the most today that I find is that they say they can't find the time to be able to do the things that they know they need to do in order to help themselves. How do you answer that?
Priorities. I mean, I myself often wish for 30-hour days because I feel like 24 is just not enough. And if I had a 30-hour day, maybe I could get the kind of sleep that I need. But I know that that's not the answer. Really, it has to be prioritize. It has to be set limits. If there are things that you really don't have to do, then maybe that you should not do them at this time if you're over your edge in terms of stress.
We're taping this program at a time where East Brunswick is going to be having another graduating class. And those kids are going to be either going out into the workforce or going away from home and off to college. Laurie, what advice do you have first for the students that are graduating? And what advice do you have for their parents and guardians?
I knew you were going to ask that. That's a good question. I think for the students, I would say understand that your life really is just beginning. And you have a certain kind of knowledge and experience that's specific to you, that is very relevant, and is adding to whatever wisdom you're going to continue to grow as you get older. Your experience has been important, what you've learned has been important, and so you're going to take that with you. But you're not yet at your end product. None of us are. And I guess the advice I would give is understand that mistakes that you make, because you're gonna, because we all do, they're hopefully just temporary. And you can get past your mistakes almost all of the time, unless your mistake is a fatal mistake, and then there's no getting past it. Fatal for you, that is. But other than that, there are ways to get past these things, and life stressors are things that, it's part of life. As parents, we wish that we could snap our fingers and alleviate all stress from our kids' lives and their friends' lives, but we know that's not so. And so part of this game, part of the process of life is experiencing stress, unfortunately, and learning coping mechanisms so that you can still be happy and still get what you need out of life. And I know something that I learned from having multiple jobs over time. I've worked in research, and I've worked with grants and funding, and so there have always been funding issues my entire career. Funding disappears, grants disappear, and so it took me a long time to come to the realization that jobs are really not end points. You may love a job, but it's not necessarily the last one in your life. It might be, but it's probably not. And they're just stepping stones to other things. And so your experiences as you graduate, you're going to have a lot of stepping stones.
And not to let the job become your identity. Separate the job from who you are.
I would agree with that.
And that makes moving on to something new that suits you better much easier.
I agree.
So what would you say to the parents?
Oh, parents. Gee, that's tough, because I have a senior graduating this year, too.
As I do, right.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say, hold on. Strap yourself in for this ride. You're never done being a parent, so know that. And there are growing pains. The pains for watching your child becoming increasingly independent and not needing you quite the same way as they did. The pains of watching them potentially make some mistakes. Your hope is that their mistakes are not too bad and that are fixable and that are just normal parts of life.
We're sharing insights so they can learn from those mistakes and fail forward. Use those mistakes as stepping stones to make distinctions, but in addition, take better actions to create a more favorable outcome.
You would hope.
You would hope.
Yeah.
And a little luck.
And a little luck. Yeah. And have your own support systems. I think a challenging thing for parents is as they approach empty nest syndrome, when children leave the house, it's pretty weird. You've spent your life worrying and thinking and providing for these particular people that you've raised, and now they're not there. They kind of don't need you, at least not in the same way. And it's kind of a reinventing of yourself, I think. You have to reinvent your own likes and dislikes, the things that you like to do, the ways you like to spend your time, even relationships with spouses. Sometimes that really falls to the wayside a little bit as you're putting your nose to the grind and raising children. But I think all those things are important to resurrect as your children develop. I guess so should we.
Thank you. In about the minute we have remaining, we've talked about a lot of different things. In the time that we have left, is there one key point that you'd like to make to our viewers that you feel would best help them be able to deal with the stresses that they have now in their life and be able to think healthier throughout the rest of their life?
It's very hard to care about anything or anyone else if you don't care about yourself. And that's not to encourage narcissism or self-centeredness. That's a very different animal. I'm talking about caring for yourself. I always tell people there is nobody that could take care of you better than you. And some people really need to learn that skill, how to take care of themselves. But we really do need to parent ourselves and take care of ourselves. And then that'll enable us to be so much better in our lives, in our work, in our families, with our friends. I think that's key. And
when it gets to the point where you feel like you can't, it's important to find people like yourself to be able to help you take better care of yourself.
There are lots of resources out there. We were blessed with the internet. You can just go on the internet and look up NJPA, New Jersey Psychological Association, and try to find a licensed psychologist near you. There are lots of resources.
Dr. Laurie Schlussel, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I'm Dr. Ken Friedman, along here with Dr. Laurie Schlussel, reminding you that wellness works when you work it.